Family skipped my wedding, calling it a trivial event for someone at the bottom and told me not to bother them. Then Mom posted Hawaii vacation videos with my brother's family. 1 month later they called saying, "The loan payments haven't been made," so I told them, "Don't contact me about trivial matters. I'm Autumn, 29 years old, and my wedding day should have been perfect." Despite my modest background, I'd built a successful nursing career and found true love with Ethan. But as I walked down the aisle, the row seats reserved for my parents sat empty. They chose a Hawaii vacation with my brother's family instead. "It's just a trivial event for someone at the bottom," my father had said. That hurt more than anything, until 1 month after my wedding when they called about loan payments they'd missed. The money I'd lent them years ago suddenly mattered now. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And please hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt like you were fighting for recognition in your own family. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I always felt there was an unspoken hierarchy in our family. My parents, Diana and Richard Parker, never tried to hide their preference for my older brother Thomas. He was their golden child from the moment he announced his intention to follow in our father's footsteps and pursue a business degree. Thomas excelled academically, graduated from a prestigious university, and landed a corporate job at a Fortune 500 company immediately after. By 30, he had married Grace, a woman my parents adored for her social connections and family background. Within 3 years, they had 2 perfect children, Emma and Liam, completing what my parents considered the ideal family picture. I, on the other hand, discovered my passion for healthcare after volunteering at a local hospital during high school. The connection I felt with patients, and the tangible difference I could make in their lives, gave me purpose. When I announced my decision to pursue nursing instead of business, my father's disappointment was palpable. "Nursing?" He'd scoffed. "All that potential wasted on changing bedpans. You could be running companies, Autumn?" My mother was more subtle but equally dismissive. "It's a respectable job, I suppose," she'd said with a sigh. "But you've always settled for less than you could achieve." The contrast in how they treated us became painfully obvious during milestone events. For Thomas's 20th birthday, they surprised him with a brand new car. For mine, I received a gift card to a department store. When Thomas got his promotion, they threw an elaborate dinner party and invited all their friends. When I graduated with honors from nursing school, they attended the ceremony but left immediately after, citing a neighborhood barbecue they couldn't miss. When Thomas bought his house, our parents contributed a generous down payment as a proper start in life. When Ethan and I began looking at modest homes, my mother suggested we live within our means and start with an apartment instead. Despite this, I maintained a relationship with my parents, always hoping they would eventually see my value. I visited monthly for family dinners, sent thoughtful gifts on holidays, and called regularly to check in. I believed that family was family regardless of our differences. 3 years ago, this belief was tested when my parents called me in a panic. They had made some poor investment decisions and were 3 months behind on their mortgage payments. The bank was threatening foreclosure if they didn't come up with $25,000 immediately. "We've already asked Thomas," my father explained, "but with the kids' private school tuition and their new vacation home expenses, he just can't help right now." I had been saving diligently for years, building a modest nest egg that Ethan and I hoped would eventually become our house down payment. After discussing it with him, we decided I would loan my parents the money they needed. "We'll pay you back," my mother promised as I transferred the funds. $600 every month until it's paid off. I insisted on putting the agreement in writing, not because I didn't trust them, but because the amount was significant. My father seemed offended by the suggestion, but my mother convinced him it was reasonable. We signed a simple contract outlining the terms, and I kept a copy in my files. For nearly 3 years, they made the payments like clockwork. Each month, $600 would appear in my account, usually on the 5th or 6th. I was proud that I could help them when they needed it, and it seemed to bring us closer. My father even called me occasionally just to chat, something he'd rarely done before. As Ethan and I began our relationship, my parents were politely interested, but not overly enthusiastic. Ethan was a kindergarten teacher with a gentle spirit and endless patience, qualities I adored but my parents found unimpressive. "A teacher," my mother had asked when I mentioned him. "Well, I suppose someone has to do it." Ethan and I had met while volunteering at a children's hospital reading program. His dedication to his students and his natural way with children captivated me from the start. Within a year, we were inseparable, and I knew he was the one I wanted to spend my life with. "Your brother married into the Wilson family," my mother reminded me frequently. "Grace's father golfs with the governor, you know." What she didn't mention was how Thomas and Grace's relationship seemed more like a business arrangement than a love match. They presented a perfect image on social media and at family gatherings, but the few times I'd seen them alone, they barely spoke to each other. Ethan and I, by contrast, could talk for hours about everything and nothing. He supported my career ambitions wholeheartedly, and I cheered him on as he developed innovative teaching methods for his young students. We weren't wealthy, but we were building a life rich in purpose and mutual respect. As our relationship grew serious, I hoped my parents would recognize the value in the life I was creating. I hoped they would see that success could be measured in more than just financial terms or social status. I would soon learn how misplaced those hopes were. Ethan proposed to me on a Tuesday afternoon in the pediatric ward where I worked. He had coordinated with my colleagues and the children I cared for, each of them holding hand-drawn signs that eventually spelled out, "Will you marry me?" As I made my rounds. By the time I reached my last patient room, Ethan was waiting on one knee, surrounded by smiling children and teary-eyed coworkers. It wasn't grand or expensive, but it was perfectly us, thoughtful, heartfelt, and centered around the work we both loved. That evening, I called my parents to share the news, hoping they would be happy for me. "He proposed at the hospital?" my mother asked, the disapproval evident in her voice. "Thomas proposed to Grace at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago, you know, during a private dinner with the string quartet." Still, I tried to involve my mother in the wedding preparations. I invited her to come dress shopping, but she claimed to have a standing appointment with her bridge club that couldn't be rescheduled. My future mother-in-law, Margaret, came and cried when I found my dress, a simple but elegant Align gown that felt like it was made for me. "Have you considered something more elaborate?" my mother asked when I showed her photos. Grace's dress was a designer original. "Your brother spent a fortune to make sure she had the very best." Every conversation about the wedding seemed to circle back to Thomas and Grace's extravagant celebration 5 years earlier. Their wedding had cost more than Ethan and I made in a year, combined with over 300 guests, a 7-tier cake, and a reception at one of Detroit's most exclusive venues. Ethan and I were planning something much smaller, 70 guests at a charming local botanical garden, with reception catered by a family-owned restaurant we loved. Our budget was modest, but sufficient for the intimate celebration we envisioned. My father remained largely absent from the planning process, but occasionally offered unhelpful commentary. "All this fuss over a single day," he remarked once, "especially for someone in your position. It's not like you're merging family businesses or forming advantageous connections." I tried to brush off these comments, focusing instead on the joy of planning a life with Ethan. We sent save-the-date cards 6 months before the wedding, making sure our families had plenty of notice. My parents received theirs, as confirmed by my mother's text, "Got your card. We'll check our schedule." As the weeks passed and formal invitations went out, my parents' response remained vague. "We'll have to see," my mother would say when I asked directly. "Your father has so many commitments these days." 3 months before the wedding, during a routine Sunday call, my mother mentioned casually that they were finalizing plans for a family trip to Hawaii. "When are you going?" I asked, a knot forming in my stomach. "The June," she replied. "My wedding was scheduled for June 12, but that's my wedding weekend," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is it? Oh dear. I must have gotten the dates confused. Well, it's too late to change now. Thomas has already arranged time off, and the children are so excited. You understand, don't you?" I didn't understand. Not at all. Later that evening, I called my father directly, hoping there had been some mistake. "Dad, Mom says you've planned a family trip during my wedding weekend. There must be some misunderstanding." His response was cold and calculated. "There's no misunderstanding, Autumn. We've invested a lot in this trip. Thomas has important business contacts in Hawaii, and this could be a significant opportunity for him." "More significant than your daughter's wedding?" I asked, my voice breaking. What he said next would replay in my mind for months to come. "It's just a trivial event for someone at the bottom. Don't bother us with this." The phone nearly slipped from my hand. "The bottom," I repeated. "The bottom of what?" You know what I mean, he replied dismissively. You and Ethan, your positions. It's not like this is a meaningful social or business occasion. It's just a small wedding for a nurse and a kindergarten teacher. I hung up without another word, tears streaming down my face. When Ethan came home and found me curled up on our couch, I could barely speak through my sobs as I told him what had happened. Your worth isn't determined by your job title or income, he said fiercely, holding me close. And our wedding is important because our love is important. If they can't see that, it's their tremendous loss. His words helped, but the pain of my father's dismissal cut deep. All my life, I had tried to earn their approval, their respect, their love. Now, I had to face the possibility that nothing I did would ever be enough. I wasn't just lower in their estimation than Thomas, I was at the bottom. That night, Ethan and I made a difficult decision. We would proceed with our wedding as planned, with or without my parents. We would celebrate our love surrounded by people who truly cared about us, not our jobs, not our status, but us. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a roller coaster of emotions. Each morning I woke with a renewed hope that my parents would reconsider, that they would realize the magnitude of missing their daughter's wedding and change their plans. Each night, I went to bed with that hope a little more diminished. I threw myself into final preparations, grateful for the distraction of last-minute details. My future in-laws, Margaret and Robert, stepped up in ways I never could have anticipated. They helped with everything from confirming vendors to assembling welcome bags for out-of-town guests. We're gaining a daughter, not just a daughter-in-law, Margaret told me one evening as we addressed place cards. And we couldn't be happier about that. Her kindness made me cry, which happened frequently in those days. The contrast between her wholehearted acceptance and my own parents' rejection was stark and painful. My best friend Riley became my fiercest protector. She had known me since college and had witnessed my ongoing struggles with my parents' favoritism. They don't deserve you, she declared, when I showed her the text from my mother confirming they were indeed going to Hawaii. They never have. 2 days before the wedding, a large bouquet arrived at our apartment. For a breathtaking moment, I thought perhaps it was from my parents, a peace offering or an apology. Instead, the card read, "To our wonderful Autumn. We are so proud to welcome you officially into our family. With all our love, Margaret and Robert." On the morning of my wedding day, I woke early. The June sunshine streamed through our bedroom window as Ethan kissed me goodbye before heading to his parents' house, where he would get ready with his groomsmen. "Next time I see you, you'll be walking down the aisle," he whispered. Riley arrived with breakfast and champagne, determined to make the day special despite the empty spaces in my heart. My bridesmaids, colleagues from the hospital and friends from nursing school created a bubble of love and support around me as we did our hair and makeup. "I brought something," said my coworker Jennifer, pulling a small blue box from her bag. "I know you had mentioned not having a something borrowed." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. "It was my grandmother's," Jennifer explained. She was a nurse too, during World War II. She always said nursing wasn't just a profession, it was a calling. Only the strongest and most compassionate people answered it. She would have adored you. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I fastened the bracelet around my wrist, drawing strength from the connection to another nurse who had understood the value of the work I did, even if my own parents didn't. At the botanical garden, everything was beautiful. Wildflowers in soft blues and purples lined the aisle. A string quartet played quietly as guests were seated. Robert, Ethan's father, found me just before the ceremony was to begin. "Autumn," he said gently, "I would be honored to walk you down the aisle if you'd like. Or you can walk alone, whatever feels right to you." I hadn't planned for either option, still clinging to the fantasy that my father would appear at the last minute. Looking into Robert's kind eyes, I made my decision. "I think I need to do this on my own," I told him. "But would you and Margaret sit in the front row? In the seats that would have been for my parents?" "We would be honored," he said, his eyes misting. As the music changed and the guests rose, I began my solitary walk down the aisle. I had worried this moment would feel incomplete without my father beside me, but instead, I felt a surprising sense of empowerment. Each step was a choice, a declaration that I was enough, exactly as I was. When I reached Ethan and saw the love and pride shining in his eyes, I knew with absolute certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. The ceremony was everything we had hoped for: intimate, meaningful, and focused on our commitment to each other. We wrote our own vows, promising to build a home where love and kindness were the foundation. As we exchanged rings, I felt a profound sense of peace. We were creating our own family now, one based on mutual respect and genuine care. During the reception, I danced with Robert for the father-daughter dance. "Thank you for being here," I whispered. "Thank you for being the daughter we always wanted," he replied. My colleague Carlos had offered to be our photographer, and his partner Marcus volunteered to create a wedding video. Throughout the evening, they captured the joy, the laughter, and the love that filled the garden. As we cut our cake and shared our dance, I found myself truly present in the moment, surrounded by people who had chosen to be there for us. It wasn't until the next morning, as Ethan and I prepared to leave for our honeymoon in Maine, that I made the mistake of checking my phone. There, on my mother's Instagram page, was a series of videos from their Hawaii trip. "Perfect family vacation," read the caption under a sunset beach scene featuring my parents, Thomas, Grace, and their children building a sandcastle. The comments were worse. "Nothing better than having the whole family together," my mother had responded to a friend's comment. The words stung like salt in an open wound. Not only had they chosen to miss my wedding, but they were publicly pretending I wasn't even part of the family. Ethan gently took the phone from my hands. "Let's turn these off for the honeymoon," he suggested. "They don't deserve space in our happiness right now." He was right. I turned off all notifications from my family's social media accounts and focused on beginning our married life together. The pain didn't disappear, but I refused to let it overshadow the beautiful commitment we had made to each other. Our honeymoon in coastal Maine became a sanctuary. We stayed at a small bed and breakfast overlooking the Atlantic, where mornings were spent watching the sunrise over the water, and evenings were filled with quiet conversations about our future. Away from the noise of everyday life and the pain of family rejection, I began to heal. "What if this is a blessing in disguise?" Ethan asked one evening as we walked along the shore. "Your parents have shown you exactly who they are. No more illusions, no more hoping they'll suddenly change." His words resonated with me. For years, I'd been chasing approval that was never going to come. I'd been measuring my worth through their eyes, always finding myself lacking. Perhaps now I could finally stop running that impossible race. Returning home to our apartment, now officially our shared home, we began to build our married life together. We established new routines and traditions, small but meaningful rituals that were uniquely ours. Sunday morning pancakes, Wednesday night board games, monthly day trips to explore nearby towns. I made a conscious decision to limit contact with my parents. I didn't block their numbers or completely cut them off, but I stopped initiating communication. No more weekly calls, no more seeking their input on decisions, no more desperate attempts to share my life with them. At Riley's suggestion, I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Bennett, who specialized in family trauma. Our sessions helped me process not just the wedding rejection, but the lifetime of subtle and not-so-subtle messages that had damaged my self-esteem. "What your parents did was emotional abandonment, Doctor," Bennett explained during an early session. "And from what you've shared, it's part of a pattern that's existed your entire life." Working with her, I began to recognize how deeply my parents' favoritism had affected me. I'd internalized the idea that I was somehow less valuable, less worthy of love and attention than my brother. That belief had influenced everything from my personal relationships to my career choices. "You've spent your life trying to earn love that should have been freely given, Doctor," Bennett said. "That's not your failure, it's theirs." Ethan's family became an unexpected source of healing. Margaret called regularly, not a pry or a judge, but simply to check in. Robert sent funny dad jokes via text that never failed to make me smile. They included us in family gatherings not out of obligation, but because they genuinely wanted us there. My colleagues at the hospital, many of whom had attended our wedding, formed another crucial support system. The chief nursing officer, Barbara, pulled me aside about a month after I returned from honeymoon. "I've been watching your work for years," she told me. "Your clinical skills are exceptional. But it's your compassion that truly sets you apart. We're creating a new patient advocacy program, and I'd like you to help develop it." This photo of professional confidence came at exactly the right time. The program would require additional training and responsibility, but also offered a path to advancement I hadn't considered before. I threw myself into the work, finding purpose and validation in using my nursing experience to improve patient care systems. Through my cousin Melissa, the only relative from my side who had attended our wedding, I occasionally heard updates about my family. Thomas's business was apparently facing some challenges, though the details were vague. My parents had canceled their annual winter trip to Florida, citing budget concerns. None of this information came directly from them. 6 weeks after our wedding, I noticed something unusual. The monthly loan payment from my parents didn't appear in my account. Given everything that had happened, I initially decided to ignore it. Perhaps it was an oversight, or perhaps it was their petty way of punishing me for getting married without them. When the payment date came and went with no deposit, I sent a brief, business-like email. I noticed the June and July loan payments haven't been made. Please advise regarding when I can expect them. I received no response, not to that email, nor to a similar follow-up I sent a week later. Meanwhile, my mother's social media remained active with posts about family dinners and weekend outings, always featuring Thomas, Grace, and their children. Never any acknowledgement of my existence or the missing payments. Dr. Bennett helped me process these continued rejections without letting them reopen healing wounds. Their behavior says everything about them and nothing about you, she reminded me. You get to decide what role they play in your life moving forward. Ethan and I focused on building our future. We began house hunting, looking for a modest home where we might eventually start a family of our own. We discussed adoption and fostering, both feeling drawn to providing a loving home for children who needed one. We know what it feels like to be unwanted, I told him one night. Maybe that understanding makes us exactly the right parents for kids who've experienced the same. Ethan's eyes had filled with tears. You're going to be an amazing mother, he said. The kind who makes sure her children never doubt they're loved. As summer turned to fall, I settled into a new normal. Life without my parents' constant presence was not just manageable but in many ways more peaceful. I no longer braced for criticism with every phone call or measured my achievements against my brothers. I was learning to see myself through my own eyes and through the eyes of people who truly valued me. Then, exactly 1 month after our wedding, my father called. The sight of my father's name on my phone screen after weeks of silence sent my heart racing. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello, I said cautiously. Autumn. My father's voice was brisk. All business. I'm calling about the deposits. I was momentarily confused. Deposits? Yes, he said impatiently. We haven't received any deposits from you for the past 2 months. I've checked with the bank, and there's been no activity. Is there a problem we should know about? The realization hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't calling about the loan payments they had missed. He was calling because he somehow expected me to be sending them money. Dad? I said slowly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. You and Mom owe me money, not the other way around. I lent you $25,000 3 years ago, and you've been making monthly payments of $600 until recently. The line went silent for a moment. Then, that was a gift, Autumn. We're your parents. Family helps family without keeping score. My hand tightened around the phone. It wasn't a gift. We signed a loan agreement. I have it in writing. A technicality he dismissed. Look, we need you to start contributing to the family fund. Thomas is going through a rough patch with his business, and we're helping him stay afloat. As a sister, you should be doing your part. The audacity was breathtaking. Let me get this straight, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. You skipped my wedding for a vacation with Thomas. Called it a trivial event for someone at the bottom? Haven't spoken to me in over a month, stopped making payments on money you legally owe me, and now you're calling to demand that I give you more money to help my brother? Don't be dramatic, my father said coldly. This is about family responsibility. Thomas has children to support, and I have a life to build, I countered. A life you've made clear you don't value or respect. This isn't about respect, he insisted. It's about practical matters. Thomas needs. I don't care what Thomas needs, I interrupted, surprising myself with my firmness. I care about the $25,000 you borrowed from me and promised to repay. I care about being treated like a member of this family instead of an ATM you can withdraw from whenever Thomas has a problem. My father's tone hardened. I'm disappointed in you, Autumn. This selfish attitude isn't how we raised you. No, I agreed. You raised me to believe I was less important than my brother. Less valuable. At the bottom. But I'm not accepting that anymore. I hung up before he could respond, my hands shaking. Within minutes, my phone began ringing again. My mother this time. Against my better judgment, I answered. "How dare you speak to your father that way?" She began without preamble. "After everything we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me, Mom?" I asked quietly. "We raised you, educated you, supported your decisions even when we disagreed with them," she said, her voice rising. "And now, when your family needs you, you turn your back on us? Like you turned your back on me by missing my wedding?" "That was different," she insisted. "We had prior commitments to a vacation that could have been scheduled any other week of the year," I pointed out. She sighed dramatically. "Autumn, you need to see the bigger picture here. Thomas is facing serious financial difficulties. His company is downsizing, and he might lose his position. They've already had to take Emma out of her private school and cancel their country club membership. They're suffering. The definition of suffering in my family had always been revealing. So Thomas might have to live like a normal person instead of the privileged one he's always been. And that's a crisis requiring my financial support?" "Family supports family," she repeated my father's earlier words. "Except when that family member is me, apparently." "That's not fair," my mother protested. "We've always treated you and Thomas equally." The blatant lie was the final straw. "Mom, I have to go. Please tell Dad that I expect the loan payments to resume immediately, as per our written agreement. If I don't receive the overdue amounts within 2 weeks, I'll need to consider other options." "Are you threatening us?" she asked incredulously. "I'm establishing boundaries," I corrected. Something I should have done years ago. After ending the call, I went straight to our home office and found the loan agreement in my files. It was clear and unambiguous, signed by both my parents and dated. There was no mention anywhere of the money being a gift. I scanned the document and emailed it to both my parents with a brief note. "As per our discussion, this is the loan agreement we all signed. Please bring the account current within 14 days. Within hours, my inbox was flooded. My father sent a terse message claiming the agreement wasn't legally binding. My mother sent a longer emotional appeal about family loyalty and difficult times. Most surprisingly, I received a text from my brother Thomas, the direct communication from him in months. "Heard you're giving Mom and Dad a hard time about money. Not cool, sis. We're all struggling right now." I drafted and deleted several responses before settling on. "This is between me and our parents regarding a loan I made to them 3 years ago. It has nothing to do with you." His reply came quickly. "Everything in this family has to do with all of us. Mom and Dad are using their retirement savings to help me right now. If you force them to pay you, you're taking food out of my kids' mouths." The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. Thomas and Grace lived in a house worth over $1 million. Even with private school and country club expenses cut, they were hardly at risk of hunger. Before I could respond, I received another call from my mother. This time, her approach had shifted from guilt to bargaining. "We've been thinking," she began, her voice honeyed. "Perhaps we could work out a compromise. What if we reduce the monthly payments temporarily? Just until Thomas gets back on his feet. The terms of the loan are already established," I replied. "I'm not open to renegotiating them. But surely you can see that helping your brother is a priority right now?" "My priority is my own financial security and the future I'm building with Ethan," I told her. "Just as your priority is clearly Thomas and his family. We've both made our choices." After a pause, her tone changed again. "Your father thinks we should look into whether you coerced us into signing that agreement. We were under duress, facing foreclosure. A good lawyer might find the contract invalid." The threat was so unexpected that I laughed out loud. "Are you seriously threatening to claim I somehow forced you to accept $25,000 from me? Please, go ahead and make that argument in court. I'd love to hear how it goes." "You've changed, Autumn," my mother said accusingly. "You used to be so sweet and accommodating." "I grew up," I corrected her, "and I stopped accepting scraps of attention while watching you give Thomas the whole meal." The conversation ended with my mother suggesting that Ethan was behind my new attitude, another deflection to avoid taking responsibility. As I hung up, I realized something important. For the time in my life I wasn't devastated by my parents' disapproval. I was angry, yes, but also clear-eyed and resolute. That evening I shared everything with Ethan. His support was unwavering. You know what the craziest part is? I told him. They genuinely believe I owe them this money. That my role in the family is to provide financial support while accepting emotional neglect in return. Because that arrangement works for them, Ethan pointed out. They're only upset because you're disrupting a system that's benefited them for years. The next day, I received a text from Grace, my brother's wife. You're putting us in an impossible position with this loan business. The family's reputation could suffer if this becomes public. Think about your niece and nephew. The mention of Emma and Liam, children I barely knew because Thomas and Grace rarely included me in their lives, was the final manipulation tactic. I didn't dignify it with a response. Instead, I called a lawyer. It was time to stop hoping my family would do the right thing and start ensuring they had no choice. The lawyer's office was in a converted Victorian house downtown, its interior a blend of historic charm and modern efficiency. Meredith Walsh, the attorney Riley had recommended, reviewed my loan documentation with careful attention. This is actually quite straightforward, she said, looking up from the papers. The agreement is clearly worded, properly signed, and includes specific repayment terms. There's no ambiguity about this being a loan, rather than a gift. My parents are suggesting they signed under duress, I explained. Meredith raised an eyebrow. Were they physically threatened? Coerced in some way? No, of course not. They needed money to avoid foreclosure. I offered to help. They accepted. That's not duress, she assured me. That's a family member extending assistance during a financial emergency. The fact that they've been making regular payments for nearly 3 years further establishes their understanding that this was a loan with repayment expectations. Her confidence was reassuring. So, what do you recommend? Given the family dynamics you've described, I suggest we start with a formal demand letter. It establishes a paper trail and demonstrates you're serious about recovering the funds. Often that's enough to prompt payment without further legal action. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. And if they don't respond? Then we discuss next steps, which could include small claims court or civil litigation, depending on your preference. But let's start with the letter and see what happens. 2 days later, I approved the final draft of the demand letter. It was professional and straightforward, outlining the loan terms, noting the missed payments, and requesting that the account be brought current within 30 days to avoid further legal action. Meredith's assistant notarized the letter before it was sent via certified mail, requiring a signature upon delivery. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about establishing boundaries and refusing to be manipulated or dismissed. While waiting for a response, I focused on areas of my life that brought joy and fulfillment. Ethan and I continued house hunting, finding a promising 3-bedroom bungalow in a neighborhood with excellent schools. At work, the patient advocacy program was gaining traction, with hospital administration allocating additional resources based on our initial success. 3 days after the demand letter was delivered, the texts and calls began, not just from my parents, but from extended family members I rarely heard from. My Aunt Patricia, Diana is absolutely devastated by your letter. What kind of daughter hires a lawyer against her own parents? My Uncle Gerald, your father helped pay for your nursing school. How can you be so ungrateful? My cousin Derek, the whole family is talking about this. It's embarrassing for everyone. I didn't respond to any of these messages, recognizing them as flying monkeys sent to pressure me into compliance. Dr. Bennett had warned me this might happen. When you change the dynamic by setting boundaries, those who benefited from the old system will work hard to pull you back into it, she had explained. Their discomfort isn't your responsibility to fix. A week after the letter was sent, Grace called me directly. This was unusual. We typically communicated through family group texts or at obligatory gatherings. We need to talk about this situation, she began, her voice tight with controlled anger. Do you have any idea what you're doing to your family's reputation? Which part of my family? I asked. The part that skipped my wedding for a vacation, or the part that expects me to financially support my brother's lifestyle? Don't be petty, she snapped. Thomas and I have certain obligations, social commitments, a position to maintain. Your parents understand that in a way you obviously don't. You're right, I agreed, surprising her into momentary silence. I don't understand prioritizing social position over basic respect and honesty. I don't understand missing a daughter's wedding for a beach vacation. And I definitely don't understand borrowing money with no intention of paying it back. Nobody said anything about not paying it back, Grace countered. Your parents just need flexibility right now because they're helping us. And why is that my problem? She sighed, dramatically. Because we're family, Autumn. Family takes care of each other. Exactly, I said. So, when are you planning to take care of me? When will my needs matter to any of you? After a long pause, Grace's voice turned cold. I always told Thomas you had a chip on your shoulder. This proves it. Your jealousy is destroying this family. No, I corrected her. Your entitlement and my parents' favoritism did that long ago. I'm just finally acknowledging it. After hanging up, I forwarded all the messages I'd received to Meredith, who advised documenting everything but continuing to avoid direct engagement. Let the legal process work, she counseled. Emotional arguments only cloud the issue. 2 weeks after receiving the demand letter, my father finally responded, not to me, but to Meredith. His email was a mixture of indignation and vague threats about family matters that should remain private and potential consequences to Autumn's inheritance. Meredith forwarded his message with a note. This actually strengthens our position. He's not denying the debt exists, he's just trying to pressure you through other means. Meanwhile, my mother launched a more subtle campaign. She began posting old family photos on social media, always ones that included me. Always with captions like missing the days when family meant everything, or nothing more precious than a daughter's love. The transparent attempt to portray herself as the wounded mother and me as the ungrateful daughter might have worked once, but therapy and distance had given me clarity. These posts weren't about love or reconciliation, they were about controlling the narrative and saving face. 3 weeks after the demand letter, as the deadline approached, I received a text from my father. We need to meet. All of us. This has gone far enough. After consulting with both Meredith and Dr. Bennett, I agreed to a meeting at a neutral location, a private room at a local restaurant. With conditions, Ethan would accompany me, the meeting would last no more than 1 hour, and there would be no discussion of withdrawing the legal demand. My father grudgingly accepted these terms, and the meeting was set for the following Saturday afternoon. As Ethan and I drove to the restaurant, he reached over and squeezed my hand. Remember, he said, you're not the same person they could manipulate before. You're stronger now. I nodded, drawing comfort from his confidence in me. I just want this resolved so we can move forward with our lives. Whatever happens in there, Ethan assured me, we're already moving forward. They can't take that from you unless you let them. With those words fortifying me, I walked into the restaurant, ready to face my family and stand firm in my truth, no matter how they tried to twist it. The private dining room at Riverside Grill felt too small for the tension it contained. My parents sat on one side of the table, Thomas and Grace on the other. Ethan and I took the remaining side, creating a triangle of opposing forces. My father spoke his businessman persona firmly in place. This meeting is about finding a resolution that works for everyone. The lawyer was unnecessary and inflammatory. I disagree, I replied calmly. I tried discussing this directly with you both. You dismissed my concerns and denied the existence of a loan that we all know was real. We never denied, my mother began. But I cut her off by sliding copies of my father's emails across the table. You suggested I had coerced you into signing. You implied the agreement was invalid. You called it a gift after 3 years of regular payments. If that's not denial, I don't know what is. Thomas leaned forward, his expression stern. Autumn, you need to understand the pressure our parents are under right now. My company's restructuring has created temporary cash flow issues, and they're helping us bridge the gap. I understand completely, I assured him. What you don't understand is that their financial choices are not my responsibility. Neither are yours. So you'd rather see your niece and nephew suffer? Grace interjected, her voice dripping with judgment. Ethan, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. No one is suffering here except Autumn, who has been consistently devalued by this family. Your children attend private school. You live in a $1 million home. You took a luxury vacation to Hawaii instead of attending our wedding. Your definition of suffering is most people's definition of privilege. My father's face reddened. You have no right to speak to us this way. This is a family matter. Ethan is my family, I said firmly. The family I've chosen. The family that shows up for me. We've always been there for you, my mother insisted. tears forming in her eyes. "We've supported you through everything. When?" I challenged. "When have you ever prioritized me over Thomas? When have you ever celebrated my achievements without comparing them to his? When have you ever respected my choices?" The room fell silent as my questions hung in the air. Finally, Thomas spoke, his voice unusually subdued. "What do you mean they borrowed money from you?" I turned to him in surprise. "The $25,000 I lent them 3 years ago when they were facing foreclosure. That's what this entire situation is about." Thomas looked genuinely confused. "You lent them $25,000, I didn't know that." "They told me, they asked you," I said slowly, "but you couldn't help because of your expenses." My brother's expression shifted from confusion to anger as he turned to our parents. "You told me you took out a home equity loan. You never said anything about borrowing from Autumn." My parents exchanged a look that confirmed everything. They had been lying to both of us, telling me they had approached Thomas, telling him they had secured bank financing. "We didn't want to worry you," my father told Thomas. "You were dealing with Emma's school issues at the time. So, you borrowed from Autumn instead? A nurse's salary." Thomas shook his head in disbelief. "And now you're using the money you're supposed to be repaying her to help me?" "It's complicated," my mother said weakly. "No," Thomas countered. "It's not complicated at all. It's wrong." The revelation shifted the entire dynamic in the room. For the time, Thomas was seeing our parents' favoritism from the outside and recognizing the unfairness of it. "You should have told me," he continued. "I would never have accepted your help if I'd known it was coming at Autumn's expense." My father attempted to regain control of the conversation. "The point is, we need to find a solution that works for everyone. Perhaps a revised payment schedule." "The point," I interrupted, "is that you borrowed money with specific repayment terms. You've missed multiple payments. And instead of honoring your obligation, you tried to manipulate and gaslight me into forgetting about it altogether. That's not fair," my mother protested. "What's not fair," Ethan said quietly, "is missing your daughter's wedding and then expecting her to fund your lifestyle choices." The meeting continued for another tense 30 minutes. Gradually, as Thomas continued to side with me rather than our parents, their position weakened. By the end, my father agreed to resume the original payment schedule and make up the missed payments within 60 days. "I'll put it in writing," he said stiffly, his pride clearly wounded. "That would be best," I agreed, maintaining the professional distance that seemed to be the only healthy way to interact with them now. As we prepared to leave, Thomas pulled me aside. "I had no idea," he said, his voice low, "about the loan or any of it really. The way they've treated you, the wedding, all of it." I studied my brother's face, seeing genuine regret there. "I believe you," I said finally. "But that doesn't change what happened." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't. But maybe it can change what happens next." Over the following weeks, my parents complied with the terms we had agreed upon. The missed payments were deposited, and regular monthly payments resumed. My father sent all communication through Meredith, maintaining a coldly professional tone that was actually a relief after years of emotional manipulation. Thomas, surprisingly, began reaching out independently. With brief texts checking in, then with an invitation for Ethan and me to meet him, Grace, and the children for lunch. The lunch was awkward but civil, with Thomas making a noticeable effort to ask about my work and our house hunting progress. As the money from the repaid loan accumulated in our account, Ethan and I made a decision. Rather than using it for ourselves, we established a scholarship fund for nursing students, focusing on patient advocacy. It felt right to transform money that had caused so much pain into something that would create opportunity and healing. 3 months after our confrontational family meeting, we closed on our new home, a charming 3-bedroom bungalow with a fenced backyard perfect for the children we hope to have someday. As we moved in our furniture and began making the house our own, I felt a profound sense of peace. We were building our life on our terms, free from the weight of expectations and obligations that had never served me. My relationship with my parents evolved into something I never expected. A limited, carefully boundaried connection based on mutual respect rather than emotional entanglement. They were not invited to our housewarming party, but they did send a card, a small gesture that would have been unremarkable from anyone else but represented significant progress from them. For his part, Thomas began the slow process of examining his own role in our family's dysfunction. During a rare coffee meeting just between the two of us, he admitted, "I never questioned why I always got more. It was easier to believe I deserved it somehow." "That's how privilege works," I told him. "It's invisible to those who have it." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to do better with Emma and Liam, making sure they understand that worth isn't measured by achievement or status." It was a start. Not forgiveness exactly, but an opening for something new to grow. 6 months after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. The joy Ethan and I felt was complicated by questions about how to involve my family. After much discussion and consultation with Dr. Bennett, we decided on clear boundaries. They could be grandparents, but only if they respected our parenting decisions and treated us with consistent respect. "Our child will never feel ranked or valued based on achievements," I told my parents when we shared the news. "They will be loved unconditionally, exactly as they are." My mother seemed genuinely moved by this. "I want to do better," she said quietly. "With your child. With you. Actions, not words," I reminded her. "That's what I'll be watching for." When our daughter Lily was born the following spring, my parents waited to be invited to visit rather than assuming their right to be there. They brought modest, thoughtful gifts, instead of the extravagant displays they had shown with Thomas's children. Small steps, but meaningful ones. The greatest gift of this difficult journey has been the freedom to define family on my own terms. Ethan's parents continue to be a blessing in our lives, showing Lily what unconditional grandparent love looks like. My colleagues at the hospital, particularly Barbara, who became Lily's honorary grandmother, create a community of support and belonging. And Riley, who stood by me through every challenge, is now Lily's godmother and my unwavering friend. "You taught me what it means to stand up for yourself," she told me recently. "Your daughter is lucky to have that example." I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with my parents. Some wounds heal completely. Others leave scars that change how we move through the world. What I do know is that I've broken a cycle that could have continued for generations. My daughter will grow up knowing her inherent value doesn't depend on comparison or competition. She will never be at the bottom of anything, especially not her family's love. If you're watching this and struggling with family dynamics that diminish your worth, please know that you deserve better. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for your well-being. And sometimes, the family you create through choice and love is more nurturing than the one you were born into. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who took you for granted? How did you find the courage to value yourself when others wouldn't? Please like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength through difficult family situations. And share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for being part of my journey, and remember, you are worthy of respect, regardless of what anyone else might say.